I talk to women all over the world, right? And there's certain countries that still have an honor for marriage. And there's some countries that don't. And guess which countries they are? First world countries. Like, yeah, women in the US, I can't tell you how many I talk to, and they're giving me all their issues. I'm telling them what they got to work on. And they're like, oh, we're just going to get a divorce. I'll move on. And I'm like, go for it. I'll tell you exactly what's going to happen. I do. No, I'm very honest with them because it they just need the honesty. And the truth is, like, feminism has a huge role in this. The reason why we're like this in this country, my opinion, is the fact that a woman no longer needs a man.
Welcome to Rebuilding the Village, a podcast that seeks to explore the causes of modern problems by examining the roots of our metaphorical village through the systems and structures in society that may have been disrupted in the technological and industrial era that we inhabit. Thank you for joining me today. Tammy, how you doing today?
Super great. How are you, Michael?
Good. So you are, if we put a title to it, you're like a marriage relationship coach, specifically for women?
Yes. Looking to branch out from there, but as of now, I work specifically with women.
What is we'll start off with, like, if you're willing to talk about your story, what got you mentioned in your description that you had a bit of a rough childhood, which may have colored your thinking towards relationships, may have caused problems in your relationship, which you then had to spend some time to reflect on yourself to get to where you are now. What was that story and how did you get where you are?
Okay. Well, I'll give you the sort of quick version, then you could dive into the parts that you want to. I grew up in a household with violent. My father was violent. There was a lot of control, specifically in the religious part of it. So like this little bubble of control and power. And then when I was 11, my father died of AIDS. And this kind of sent me in this spiral because although my dad scared the shit out of me, there was a sense of relief when he died. And then there was this shame of the relief because I also did love him. So I struggled in this sort of like roller coaster. I'd say for years, I was just absolutely angry and bitter. And then kind of just not knowing. I spent up until like age 20, just like really just pissed at the world, right? Pissed at God, my dad, the world, my parents, my upbringing, everything, you name it. And then I had several times in my life where I had these big, like, life-changing, like, I got to fix this shit kind of moments. And so one time was around 20 where I was like, I can't live like this anymore. I can't live with this anger. And then I married my husband when I was, 25. And then I had my first child at 26. And this is where all my shit sort of surfaced. The triggers started bugging out and I just was not okay. And this is where I went kind of seeking. I need freaking help. So, you try with the medication, you try with the therapy, you try with the books, you do the retreats, you do everything to try and fix your shit. And you're just like, this is not going deep enough. Like, it would just sort of get kind of better. And then it would just go right back to the same old pattern. And so when my husband and I, we were just not good for a lot of years. And it hit this point where I was just like, I can't do this. Like, I can't be married. Like, I don't even want to be a damn mom. Of course, you can't put him back. So here I was. And that's when I was like, I got to get serious. Like, I got to find something. And so instead of going to therapy, I looked for some deeper options. And that's where I found the trauma therapy. And that's where shit started really shifting for me because I found the root of the problem. And then from there, my husband and I first I transformed, then my marriage transformed, then my family dynamics changed. Everything in my life shifted because I changed. And that was when I was like, no, everyone needs it. Like, this is the gift I get to give the world. And so, yeah, that's how I got to where I am today.
It's a very common theme I've heard a lot. I would wager from, I don't want to say the older generation, but I think the likelihood of the further back you go or the older you get, the higher likelihood you're going to hear, just suck it up. That's just life. You don't have to, like, that's just how things are. Sometimes you're not happy. And then you don't realize how many times these are little, like you mentioned before, triggers and things that you're building up through childhood, through adolescent years, through your teenage years. And it really governs your behavior unless you're very aware of it, unless you actually spend the time to figure out, where did this come from? Why is it here? How can I address it? And how much of this is me and how much of this is the triggers? That's a big one I've been trying to like unravel myself, is figuring out, like, is this my personality? Is this just who I am? Or is this the way I feel like I have to act because I'm trying to protect myself from a person who vaguely resembles a toxic person from my past? Yeah. Yeah. And in the case of the relationship in the marriage, like what kind of trauma therapies did you go through? It was like EMDR or something specific?
It's similar. It's a certain process that I learned from one of my mentors, one of my coaches, but it's very similar to EMDR. It uses the same like right and left hemisphere of the brain, kind of going back through the event to neutralize it. So basically, when you're in this high state of negative emotion, what happens is there is a belief that pops into your mind. Actually, it's a thought. It starts out as a thought, but in that moment, it's boom, stamped onto your subconscious mind. It becomes a belief. So in those first 5 years of life, those traumatic events have actually, like you said, it's created your personality. It's literally created your personality. The reason why you react, the reason why you were triggered by XYZ is those events that happened to you very early on in life. So when you neutralize the event, which is basically taking the emotional tag off of it, it's like you take the tag off of it, and then all of a sudden it's just this neutral event, almost like you're watching a movie, but you have no emotional tie to it anymore. So imagine, it's almost like a clean slate. I have a lot of clients that say, oh my gosh, I feel like a 100-pound weight has been lifted off of me. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of how trauma works. It is like a weight in that backpack that you've been wearing. And if we could just take that weight out, right, and lighten your back, like just imagine. So yes, your entire personality was created in the first 5 years of your life experience.
And questioning if the entire personality is created in the first 5 years, then it's like if you put a baby into a blank room and left them there for 5 years, would they have no personality? Or would there be a personality under there that would just manifest through curiosity and time? But that's conflicting for space in your head with the personality you create to survive your circumstances.
Well, I mean, and it really, like, modern science is like, it's brilliant now. I don't know if you know the work of Bruce Lipton, but I love his work, because he talks about epigenetics. Literally 95% of your beliefs were programmed into you. So if you haven't done any of the inner work, guess what? Your beliefs are your grandparents back 7 generations on both sides. So they don't really originate with you. Now, some experts say up until age 8, right? They range from like 5 to 8, but the majority of your beliefs they're like cemented in there in those first 5 years. So yes, you can change them. That's the good news. You can absolutely change any belief. But if you are just like, la, 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 like if you're burying your head in the sand and you're not trying to really work on yourself and dive in, then 95% of your hard drive is like, it's the old system. It didn't even come from you.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have, this is a good quote, I don't remember who said it exactly. It was that children will sacrifice authenticity for attachment, in that you'll do everything you can to essentially fit into the family, even if it kind of violates or goes against who you are intrinsically, what you're interested in, what your personality is like, and things like that. You will create this false persona, which will then carry over into, adolescence, to teenage years, to adulthood. And I've had a number of people, I've actually had, I think two other people I've spoken to who had the same story of like, I was convinced that if I just did this, this, and this, then I would be super happy. And at the same time, I was doing it stuff, and I was depressed out of my mind. I was anxious. I was suicidal. I was miserable. I hated every second of it. And then, trauma work, whatever it may, therapy, letting it go and realizing like, oh crap, that wasn't even me at all these years. It was totally somebody else I was trying to be. And I think within that, a couple things that people are afraid to let go of who they think they are, because it's a part of you that essentially has to like move on, die off, let go, to make space for who the person who you actually are, or the person you really want to be. And you also sometimes have to withstand the pressure from your external environment, for the people in your life that may not like the fact that you're changing. and you're not the person you were before, that they got comfortable with you being around. And then there's sometimes you feel like there's rejection that comes from your peers, from your family, from friends, coworkers that are just like, what's going on with you? You don't want to hang out and party till 2 o'clock in the morning anymore. You don't want to eat crap food and not do all this crazy stuff. Like, well, the fun you is gone. What happened to the fun version of you? You're not cool anymore. What happened? Then you kind of say, oh, crap, is there something wrong? Am I doing something wrong? I feel like I'm doing something wrong, because
Was
there's a
that your
part of you that,
experience?
no, but I've seen a lot of people over the years, a touch of my experience, I guess, because like even within my family, they'll refer to me as like Mr. Healthy. Like I like to exercise and eat clean, and they're not like morbidly overweight, but it's enough unhealthy people in the family, some here and there, that it's just like I started to get really big into health and wellness after having a childhood filled with a lot of junk food. A lot of the junk food was more convenience than it was like cost of living. And it was just easier to do Chinese food and pizza and things like that rather than sit down and cook a meal. But I became the healthy guy, and I think there were little subtle signs of pushback, like, oh, he's Mr. Healthy, he's Mr.
Oh yeah,
Fitness man.
people hate when you change the program. Like that's what I tell my clients when I start working with them. I'm like, you're not going to be a vibrational match any longer for the people in your life currently, and it's going to get very uncomfortable for them. And I just remember when I changed, my husband was very uncomfortable. He's like, "Where's my fighting buddy? Where did she go?" And I was like, "She left the building. She ain't coming back." I could tell he was in this place of like, well, what does that make us now? What does that mean for us now? And so, yeah, people get very uncomfortable with change because, basically if you're changing, they're like, what does that mean for us? Am I losing what we had? And so it's just about getting very comfortable with the fact, like getting very freaking selfish.
That's a good way to put it.
You have to get very freaking selfish. Think about our programming. Our parents are like, you will do these things to please me. And when you please me, this will happen for you. And you want those things, right? And if you do things that I tell you not to do, you're going to get these things, right? And so what do we want? We want the good stuff. So we are trained and programmed to please other people. So that's kind of what you were saying. And when you come to me, I'm going to say, guess what? What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? I'm not going to ask you what any of these other people want from you, because I don't care how much you pretzel yourself to please all of them. You will not do it. You will not be successful. The only way you can really uplift other people is being so authentically you and not give a about what any of them think about you.
Yeah. And in the process, you'll find people that do enable the better parts of you by letting go of those old people. Yeah. Yeah. You were mentioned before about your husband, how he had to change. But what was the transition like? Well, when you mentioned the fighting buddy, was that like, oh, we go out to do boxing classes together? Or was it just every other day is a fight about the dumbest shit ever?
Not every other day. Every day,
single day is a
all
fight about
day
the dumbest shit
long.
ever.
Yeah. I mean, well, if we're taking it back to the trauma, like you literally attract, if you're in your not healthy state, you attract someone who has that trauma bond to you. So him and I had a lot of similarities. We both, our fathers both transitioned when we were kids. We same birth order. Our moms moved on quickly. We had very similar experiences with stepdads. We had very similar traumatic events. However, our triggers were opposite. So for me as the controller, when I get triggered, I get loud and aggressive and pushy. And when he gets triggered, he goes back. He just he gets quiet. He shuts down. He flees. He's got to get out of it. And so that would trigger me because I'm like, that's like, that would trigger my, the rejection, the betrayal, like you're leaving me. And he would be like, oh, you're attacking me. And so we would just have this sort of like, we would just trigger the F out of each other. When I learned myself and, this is why I do it. And this is like how I learned to survive my childhood. And that's how he learned to survive his. It could just it opened me up to compassion of like, this is the little boy within him that is scared out of his mind. And this is the little girl within me who is scared out of my mind. And these are the ways we react. And so when the compassion comes in, all of a sudden it's like, we're just these scared little kids still, and that's what that's the new way I got to see it. And so seeing him that way, I didn't want him to be scared of me, And so that was really a huge calling for me but yes, we just argued and fought all the time.
I think what we're referring to is the anxious avoidant dance.
Yes. Yep, that was our dance.
It's extremely common, and it's what I hear when I talk to people about I talk to people about this. There's intrigue, but if I talk to somebody who's actually in it, there's just confusion, and
Yeah.
it's hysterical because what I always hear very commonly is people who are acting like avoidant, like your husband was acting. Very common in men, but occasionally you'll find it in women too. That the most common thing I hear is, "How are they this old and they still act this way?" And to me, it's like, well, they're not this old. They're still 5 years old. When those moments come
Mhm.
up, 5-year-old little boy comes running into hiding, runs to his room, runs to his blanket, runs to whatever. And it sounds like that's just immature baby. Like, yeah, but that's just how you have lots of
Every
things in your
age.
brain. Yeah.
Yeah, every age you've ever been is still within you. If you remember those, like, what are those Russian dolls? Like one
Yeah.
doll inside
Yeah.
that's how
Yeah.
we are as human beings. And if we have unhealed wounds, we carry all that pain in our bodies. It is literal masses inside. Like when I do some of the processing I do on my ladies, because two of the first languages we learn when we're born is color and emotion. And so we can literally find those, like the toxic colors that need to come out. They put their hand on it. They know exactly where it is. They feel it in their body and they know what color it is. And I know the colors that mean all the different things, the emotions, the attachment. So we literally pull it out. So it is a physical resonance within the body. And so if there is emoted emotions, so emotions are energy in motion. So if there are negative emotions trapped in the body, they need to be emoted in order to move out of the body. So there's many processes for this, by the way. There's tons, but I think it's just so powerful to know that you can shift that, and it can be very fast.
Yeah. I think people have a hard time holding conflicting ideas in their head. A good example might be that a person you could have your mother or your father could have meant well and still effed up.
Oh,
Like, and people say like my mother was terrible or my mother was a saint. Like, she was probably both, and
she
that's okay.
definitely was.
It was both. Like, nobody's perfect.
Mhm.
And what people have a hard time doing, I've seen this plenty, is that I can't speak ill of my father. I can't speak ill of my mother. Like, you're not
Mhm.
speaking like they're the devil, but you are speaking to say,
Mhm.
emotionally, these are some things that happened and it wasn't okay. And I'm not going to keep telling myself it's okay. And I'm going to try to like let it out and live my life from that place while also appreciating the good that they did. And then even recognizing, like you said before, sometimes it could be like a seventh or eighth generation back. There's a good quote. You have to remember sometimes if you're in a relationship with somebody and you're in an argument, you might not be arguing with that person. You might be arguing with like the spirit of their dead great great grandmother, because
Mhm.
it's just this behavior that got passed along generation to
Mhm.
generation to generation, and it just
Mhm.
continues. And people are very in the moment. They're very like, well, you're 40 years old. A 40-year-old should act like this. It's like, well, I'm still acting out my great grandfather's alcoholism or his abuse or his neglect, and it literally just patterned through the generations. And recognizing again, like those two things can coexist, and it's okay. And also that with enough time and practice, you will be able to observe yourself, see yourself externally. Like you said before, like, oh, this isn't me and my husband arguing. It's my 5-year-old little girl screaming at his 5-year-old little boy. And those two
Mhm.
people are having a tussle in the wrong direction and can't play together. And then learning to kind of space yourself from that and observe that emotion, letting it out, and
Mhm.
then trying to create better habits in the life and the relationship and the marriage. And it sounds like it worked out great because you have 3 kids. After the
Mhm.
first one, which sounded like you didn't want to be a mom, you didn't want to be in a relationship, and
At
then you're like,
times.
what was that?
At times. I mean, like you have your kids and like, there's no love like it. Like, you're freaking obsessed. But at the same time, you're like, who said that I have what it takes to raise this human? That's how I feel. It's like, I'm not equipped. Like, I suck. I had a lot of really deep self-hatred. I'd
Mm,
say the majority of my life. It's still something that I'm constantly playing with, but just like very deep self-hatred. So yes, it's like, I'm just like, who said that, like, I have what it takes to like raise these 3 daughters. I have 3 daughters, almost 16, 14 and a half, and 6. And I just feel at times I'm just like, how are they surviving? Like, they know the two parts of mom, that the unhealed mom that just like was a nightmare, and they know me now, and we talk about it very freely. So you know how you were kind of saying, like, there's the two versions of me. I've opened that up for conversation with my kids because I want them to tell me, hey mom, you hurt me and these are the ways, and I want to be able to like talk about it, because I had to deal with a lot of these things after my dad had passed. And so I'm dealing with basically not a physical being. And I think it's helpful when you have that, you know. So I have that conversation very open with my kids of like, we laugh at who I used to be.
That's good though, yeah. And it's also setting a good precedence for your kids to know that they may have similar parts of themselves, and learning to, I wouldn't say separate, but like integrate in a healthy way the parts
Love
of
that word.
you that are just who your personality is, how you operate, what works best, what doesn't work best, and recognizing like some days I'm gonna have a moment where like angry mom, old traumatic mom's gonna come out to play for an hour or two, but you know it's not me, and that's having a moment. And it's an interesting thing. You ever heard the term flooding, emotional flooding? The idea is essentially that when your brain experiences something in the environment, it could be in a relationship, could be your family, could be your marriage, could be work, could be whatever it is, that it perceives as a threat, even if it's not a threat, you're going to get shot up with some stress hormones. And it's going to almost like flood your brain in a way. And you need time to metabolize those hormones out of your system to then calm down.
Yeah.
And that's where people really, I think, don't understand the value of just saying open communication is basically saying like, listen, I'm having a disproportionate amount of stress right now, and every thought coming across my mind is involving me strangling you. So rather than do that, I'm just going to go for a walk and just, take a hot bath, take a shower, whatever the situation is, because I know that's not me. I know that's not what I want to
Exactly
do
what we
right
do.
now. I
That's
know
what my
that's not the
husband and
person
I
I
do.
want. Yeah, and I know that's not where I am. It's just that if I came up to you and shot you up with adrenaline right now, you wouldn't be able to think straight, because that's not what adrenaline's for. Adrenaline's for helping you run away from the lion. But if you're convinced you're still being chased by a lion, there's no point in having a conversation about our taxes or about what college your kid's going to go to or things like that, because I literally cannot think straight because I'm flooding right now. And communicating that to somebody to say, I'm not in the place to talk right now. It's not you. It's me. It's emotions are running high. It's whatever it is. I need an hour to let my body digest the hormones from my system so I can calm down, come back to baseline, then we can talk. So in the broader sense, you do coaching. What do you feel the most common issues are? You're coaching specifically women. You want to incorporate in the future, but mostly women. What do you feel is the most common issues you see coming across in your clients?
Well, as a controller myself, I tend to attract the opposite. So I attract women. It was funny because you made a comment. You said, I see like most men do this. And I'm like, not my experience. The women I attract, they're more the supporters. And it's because, as a controller, it's a driver. It's like the driving. You attract your opposite. And so the women that come to me are often struggling. They've made themselves small in the relationship. Their husbands are more of the controllers. So they've given away their power to him for so long, doing exactly what, he wants this. I'm good. And making themselves small. And then they're in this place where their marriage is just completely imbalanced. And my work is not just like helping her heal the trauma and neutralize the trauma and work on those old wounds. But through that work, they then see, this is the reason why I allowed this behavior from him. And this is the reason why I've showed up this way. And so then they change their behaviors, right? And our work is just balancing out the energy. Well, if you've given away all the power to him and he's way up here, then you get to step into your power. You get to take it on. You get to figure out who it is you want to be, what it is you want, and we get to balance out that relationship. And so that's kind of my biggest work with my ladies, is just getting them to love themselves enough to create what it is that they actually want, which is like, if it's going to be a healthy relationship, the energy has to be equal. It's not going to withstand long term if we don't get those energies balanced.
What type of energies do you feel like you're referring to in this capacity?
So if he's the controller, we're just going to, I have opposite, by the way. I do attract some of myself in my clients as well, but I'm just giving you the majority of the women I work with. So if he's more of the controller and she's more of the supporter, then he kind of like, he controls the money. He like tries to control what she does. He has the say in all these things. And she gives it to him. She gives it to him because she thinks that's going to make him happy and it's going to make the marriage good. But over time, it doesn't, because she's not his source. And it doesn't feel good when you're looking to another human being as your source. So she's made him the source. He feels very powerful, very inflated. But then it gets to a place where it's so out of whack. So she has to start to say, these are the things I would like to, because a lot of times there's infidelity. He's been unfaithful. She's allowed it. And she's now like, I've just kind of given all of it away. And, a lot of times she doesn't choose to continue on with the marriage, because once she figures out that she's just been putting herself down here, she figures out like, oh no, this is not how I really want to be treated. And I deserve to have someone who's going to honor and love me, and put me up on a pedestal too. So it's like a lot of times they can't hang. I won't say a lot of times. That hasn't been my experience, but there are some that are just, they realize that the imbalance has just, they can't hang. And so they have to go separate ways.
I wonder, how often do you get the women who come to you, they'll work with you, they'll say like, I tried tipping the scales back and he's fighting back, or she's fighting back.
They always fight back.
They always fight back. Yeah.
Always. Whenever you disrupt the pattern, especially if they've been together a while. Like my husband and I, we've been together almost 18 years. Like when you try and change a system that's been going on for a very long time, it's like, you better get ready for the fact that they're going to be the other one's going to be uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So if they don't push back, then I would question some things. Like, do they not care? Like, so most of the time, yeah, there's a pushback, and you got to be ready for it. And that's the reason why you have to get really selfish. You have to serve yourself first, because if your cup is empty, there is nothing you have to give anyone else. It's just, it's not possible.
Yeah. And I wonder, well, have you had a lot of reports from people who have done this disruption, but they kept the relationship going because the other person was like, wow, good point. I didn't realize I was being so controlling or not leaning in enough, or whatever the direction may be, that the other person kind of came back, and then they changed the dynamic and the relationship got better?
Oh, yeah. Most of them, that's what happens. It just depends on how big that imbalance is.
Yeah, and the person you're dealing with, I guess.
If she's like, if he's been way up here and that's been a practice for a long, like say I don't like to use terms because I hate putting people into boxes. I feel like, anyways, if he's like borderline narcissist control, that's like a very extreme.
I understand. Yeah.
It's a very extreme controller, and a lot of people like to peg the other person. Oh, narcissists don't change. I'm like, absolutely they do. Because of my husband and I would say I was more of that. And if I can change, anyone can freaking change. Right? So I just feel like if there is that much of an imbalance, because in order to have a narcissist, you have to have a really passive person. So we can get there, but it's going to take some really big steps, right? Yeah. But what I tell her is, when I start working with her, is like, whether or not he meets you in the middle, you have to change this dynamic for you, because if this ends, and it will, if there's enough time before one of you transitions, it's got to end, because that dynamic just doesn't work. If you don't change this pattern, you will attract another one just like it. And these people, right? The face changes, right? The face changes, but it is the same freaking person. Yeah. This is what we do. This is just it's the programming. It's like you said earlier, it's not even really us. However, if there's not a pattern interrupt, you could just bet that you're going to attract a different face with the same personality.
Yeah, that was me in my relationships over the years, that I've had the same person, or 2 or 3 different types of person in different skin, multiple times in multiple relationships. I'm curious, where do you think this is a root causes of these? Like on a grand scale, on a societal level, this is kind of the theme of the podcast, is like, what is the village? And then to me, so far, one of the interpretations I've come up with the village is like this giant multi-generational machine that has a number of like systems and trends and patterns that produces people generationally within certain patterns to, ideally as a collective across all of the world, pushing society and technology and everything towards the right direction. But once in a while, it starts going in the wrong direction. And most recently, the one thing I keep hearing across the board is that industrialization across the world really threw a giant wrench into our traditional village tribal systems by separating parents from their kids for long periods of time during the day, and that a lot of the kids are now having to either deal with emotionally disrupted parents because they're kind of out of their habitat, or find ways of getting that kind of nurturing from an elder in some capacity in other areas of their life, which could show up in forms of kids learning how to be a person from the internet. It could be from toxic people in your life. A good example of this is like gang violence. Like a lot of people, a lot of young men who are involved in gangs, they're not waking up one day and say, you know what, life's going great, time to join a gang. It's usually because I don't have anybody to show me the ropes. These guys seem like they kind of have something together, so I'm just going to go over there and talk to them. Well, why did this happen? Because there's many fathers in the home. Why is there many fathers in the home? Because they're all working their butts off because the economy is falling apart. And all these interconnections that goes into like this giant village machine producing people. In the case of marriage and a lot of these issues, where do you feel these issues could be coming from on a bigger scale? Because it's getting more and more common, more pervasive.
Well, I notice, like, I talk to women all over the world, right? And there's certain countries that still have an honor for marriage, and there's some countries that don't. And guess which countries they are? First world countries. Like, yeah, women in the US, I can't tell you how many I talk to, and they're giving me all their issues. I'm telling them what they got to work on. And they're like, oh, we're just going to get a divorce. I'll move on. And I'm like, go for it. I'll tell you exactly what's going to happen. Yeah. I do. Yeah, I'm very honest with them because it, like, they just need the honesty. And the truth is, like, feminism has a huge role in this. The reason why we're like this in this country, my opinion, is the fact that a woman no longer needs a man. In all the generations past, our survival was based on a marriage. Not anymore. Not anymore. So if you ask me why I think marriage is at a 48% or 48% divorce rate in this country, it's because we don't need men. So what does that require? That requires men, because we are very emotional and men are less. And it requires us to meet in the middle. He has to raise his vibration too. He can no longer overpower her. He can no longer just like ignore her. He has to rise to the occasion, because we're at a place in history where she doesn't need him. So now marriage is at a place where this is a really good thing, by the way. This means marriage is at a place where it can actually be pleasurable. It could be pleasurable. Not just survival, not just like, I need him, got to stick around, like he's the dad. It's like, no, it gets to be pleasurable. You can now have a relationship where it's this beautiful, like, spiritual dance, like what my husband and I have now versus what we had before. It's just so beautiful. And it couldn't get there if we didn't go through the shit. So I'll tell anyone, I don't care where you're at. I believe 100% you can have a beautiful, delicious, amazing relationship, but you are going to have to raise your conscious level. Because in order for me to have this, I had to take 100% responsibility for me, who I was, and what I was calling towards me because of the beliefs that I had. So if you aren't digging in and looking at your own belief system, then you're probably on the negative system, because you can have, do, or be whatever it is you want, but you're probably going to have to change some beliefs in order to have that.
This is where an interesting point, though. I think there's this overlap with biology, which gets a little bit confusing for people. For example, if you care to talk about like or I guess a common relationship, like what if you say you don't?
You can go as deep as you want. You could ask me anything.
That's fine. This is what I enjoy, because I think there's multiple angles to it. And so when you say like you don't need a man, but what do you keep your husband around for then?
Because I want one. It's not a need. It's a want. It's a desire. Like, for instance, people don't understand the beauty of like having a beautiful family dynamic. My kids have him and I, and they get to see us loving each other. This is not something that a lot of kids get to see. They get to see him and I loving each other. They got to see what we were compared to what we are now. They get the benefit of having the benefit of having two parents together. Like you mentioned, with not having a father in the home, you know the benefits of having a father in the home, right? So And then this is not to say that if you do get divorced that your kids are like screwed, because I just believe we all experience trauma. It is not a negative thing. In my opinion, it is not a negative thing. It's very positive. However, there is nothing quite like having the family together, like as a whole unit. So I have my husband because I want him, not because I need him, because I want him, because I believe that what we can co-create together, like part of my religious background, there's lots of parts in the Bible that talks about the becoming one. It's when two people become one flesh is what it says. But what I believe that process is two people with the same goal in mind going towards that goal together. And then it also talks about being unequally yoked. So marriage can be the most miserable institution ever, or it could be the most like amazing, blissful, but it depends on that goal you're going towards. If you're going this way and he's going that way, shit, you're going to be like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if both of you are like, no, I want that thing. And he's like, yeah, I want that thing. Let's go after it. And you were doing it together, like that's like a power. Like for instance, my business, my husband and I do this business together. I'm the face of it. I do all this part of it and he does everything else, but we do it together. And it's like this powerful engine because we're in it together. And so that's the beauty of marriage. And that's why I encourage people, if you are up for the challenge, because I believe that marriage is the greatest challenge to our ego. Because it's a combining of two people into one, is the most difficult thing I've ever done. And it is the most pleasurable thing I've ever done.
Yeah, the one thing that pops into my mind, and I've heard this a number of times in different sort of cases, and I think there is a nuance on the spectrum from want to need. Mm-hmm. Is like what I'll hear most people say, like, well, without men, you wouldn't have like on both sides. You hear this, so it's like, well, without men, you wouldn't have like the infrastructure of the roads, like the heavy duty lifting that we got here. It's like, yeah, and without the women, those parents, like those women birthed those men, you wouldn't have those men in the first place. So it's like there is a bit of a bilateral need there. Yeah. In some capacity. So I guess the statement of like, we don't need men, it's like, well, if we're going to say we need men need to say we need women. It has to be fair on both sides. And in the case of even like a marriage, it's like, you don't need a marriage, but if you want to be the best version of yourself that you possibly could be, to pull out the best version of yourself and let go of the toxic bad behaviors you're going to hold on from childhood, one of the best methodologies is things like marriage or a long-term relationship where you're stuck with that person because you're stuck with your you're
no one likes that word, Michael. Stuck.
You're trapped, you're encased, you're no, the idea that marriage is
like you're choosing the partnership, like
you're also choosing the pains. Like you said, it was one of the hardest things you've done. And I think people don't really grasp the fact that most of what you're fighting through in a marriage probably is, or in growth and development, is you're fighting yourself. And that's why I think people, you said before, like that people
everything's a mirror though, Michael. Like every relationship you have is a mirror of your relationship to yourself. Like
exactly.
Like someone cuts you off like every single experience you have, I could trace it back to a belief. If we had enough time, I could trace it back to a belief that you hold in your subconscious mind. Yeah. So yes, marriage is the closest mirror. It's like you share a room, you share a bed, you share a house, you share finances, you share DNA, you're humans. But so there's no mirror quite that close, which is why it's so difficult. But at the same time, if you don't see yourself as the full being, like if you think you are just a body, just an ego, if you think you're a one-faceted being, then that's a whole nother ballgame. But if you recognize yourself as the creator of your own life experience, as the spiritual aspect, as well as the physical aspect, as well as the mental aspect, if you don't see yourself in all those facets and you are trying to say, yep, this is my meat suit, this is who I am, as soon as I go, I'm gone. Like, it's like, you know what I'm saying? It's just the lens in which you perceive yourself, life, others.
Yeah, the Me Too thing is kind of funny, but it is something that people will disconnect from themselves because their emotions, their potential, who they really are authentically, that it becomes easier to disconnect from yourself than to put in the work to figure out who am I and where would I best thrive? And what gifts do I have to give the world? And it's tough. It's tough because you have to do a lot of trial and error, and you're going to get skinned and burned a lot along the way. And just like you're going to scrape your knees, you're going to fall on your face, you're going to get a bloody nose, black eye. And that's kind of what something like marriage does for you, or any kind of long-term relationship, or even if you're working in a company of some sort. And like every time you say it's a mirror, what's really coming up is like the self-limiting beliefs, like you said, like because you're mirror to your self-conscious, and it's difficult for people to separate, to think. A simple example is, for me, it's like when I wake up in the morning, I feel like a zombie, and then I look at the rest of the day, I'm like, this day is gonna suck. Why? Because I feel like crap right now. So I'm projecting how I think the rest of the day and the rest of my life is going to suck based on this one moment. But I've had enough days where I got out of bed, I drank a cup of coffee, I went for a walk, and holy crap, I feel amazing. This day is going to be the best day ever, and the rest of the week and the rest of the life is going to be awesome. Oh my God. And then you have that enough times where you look at it and realize, like, oh, there's a pattern here. When I wake up, I can't be thinking about like long-term rational decisions because I need to get out of this groggy, like still kind of sleepy state, and then map that out into the future. I have to go through a couple of things, and like when you wake up, when I wake up in the morning, sometimes I'm like, I don't feel like getting out of bed. I don't want to drink. I don't want to have to like press the button to make coffee. I'm tired. My arms hurt. I had a long day, so I didn't get enough sleep last night. And that's like the work is like I have to just fight through to get to the person I'm going to be in 20 minutes or half an hour to make sure the rest of the day looks good. And then having people realize, if you do those moments enough where that person that flips you off in traffic piss you off, or your husband said this or your wife said that, you start to notice the patterns and realize, like, oh, every time they say this or this happens, I feel this, which means there must be something there I haven't addressed yet. Or you could say, F this person, I'm just going to go over here and act like I don't need to change. I don't need to address anything. And it's just, it's easier to live in that disconnected state. It's harder to reconnect, figure out who you are, find your authenticity, and live into your potential, but way more satisfying, way more worth it in the long term. It can be difficult to see it when you feel like crap.
I think that what you just described, I think that's like, I would never want to go back to
the person you were.
No, meaning like if you're not taking dominion over your own emotional state.
Yes.
Like for me, I command myself to be meaning it goes like this: the identity creates the belief creates the thought creates the emotion, and the emotion creates the circumstance of your life. So if that's the case, then if I can navigate my thoughts to what I want versus what I don't want, right? So that's normal human condition. It's mostly negative, right? If you don't take any dominion over your thoughts, you're going negative, right? So in order for you to heal and step into the new you do have to direct your thoughts on purpose. And you're right. You do have to be very conscious of the thoughts you're bringing in. Like you have all the power to create what it is that you want, but you cannot do it if you're just like, la, 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 let's see what happens, blah, blah. Like you can't do it. Like you have to be so, so, so intentional with what you're thinking about, what you're digesting as far as like music, TV, who you're talking to, what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you have to change those things in order to be very, very aware of your emotional state.
Intransigence, I think, is the word.
Oh gosh, Michael, you and these big words. What?
Sorry, I was going to put my dictionary away.
Yeah.
No, it's a word. I remember hearing it from a YouTube video a while back, and it was just the idea of like you're unwilling to take like a self-reflective look at yourself, because I think in the case what we're alluding to here in the coaching work and like the past and the childhood wounds is like an inner sense of inner child. And when a lot of people hear that, they think like, oh, it's just some woo-woo magic crystals, inner child bullcrap. No, it's a way of saying you have a behavior pattern that was developed early on in your life that is still playing itself out.
Mm-hmm.
And what needs to happen at some point, and this is kind of what we do this is kind of what the village did. This is what when we're raising kids, we're teaching them you're going to have emotions, and that's normal. But you can't always let them just run the show. You have to find a way to slowly separate and realize, like, I'm going to look at my emotions. I'm feeling like crap, but here's the decision I'm going to do, not what the emotions want. The emotions want me to put my fist through a wall and, set things on fire and throw a tantrum like maybe a 2-year-old, because they have no separation of like emotion and what they can do. But over time, you learn to not separate the two, but coexist. So like, I'm going to have emotions and I acknowledge them and I recognize them, but I'm going to figure out, is this a necessary emotion to be leaning into right now? Or do I have to give it some space and then think of what I actually should do? And in the future, what do I have to do to make sure this emotion doesn't hit me as hard or as intensely? That's what I was saying before about me waking up in the morning, is like, I know I'm just not a morning person. I'm much more of a night owl. But if I have to get stuff done in the
If
morning, I
you
had to
say
say,
so, you could change that belief if you wanted. That's all I'm saying. You could change it, but you got to tell yourself a different story.
what I'm saying is, in the morning when I wake up, the first feeling is, oh God, I don't want to get out of bed. But the thought behind that is, but I do know for a fact, if I get up, drink a cup of coffee, go for a walk around the block, whatever, just get some sunshine on my face, I'm going to feel like $1,000,000. So that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah. Well, I
That's
just feel like when you are excited, like that, all that tells me, Michael, is you're not doing something that brings you joy. Like if you wake up in the morning and you're excited, that's because you're fixing to do something you really like to do, right?
yeah. That's another
Right.
point to it too.
So it's like
Or I slept
when
too late the
people,
night before.
but when people are waking up, think about yourself when you were a kid and tomorrow we're going to Disneyland or tomorrow's Christmas. Dude, it doesn't matter if you only slept an hour. You are popping out of bed. You are like so stoked. You're like, right? And it's because you have something to look forward to. I feel like adults are not doing the things that bring them joy. And that's why they have such a struggle getting up out of bed in the morning. If you were getting up to do something that lit you up, like you just could not wait, like you love your work, it just is not work. It just isn't.
Well, then and then tying back to the biology portion, it's like you love your work, but you stayed up till 4 o'clock in the morning. It's like maybe you might feel a little bit groggy the next day. So that balancing act, in my case, it might be I'm going to bed too late.
4 o'clock in the morning.
Staying up until 4 a.m. I thought I did. I'm saying if somebody does.
Oh.
It was like if you've got, that could also tie into like if you have bad habits. Like, well, I have a habit hypothetically of I play video games, I watch Netflix, I'm on YouTube until like 2 a.m. and then I feel like crap the next day. But to ask yourself, like, well, why are you numbing yourself out the night before?
Yeah.
Like that could be something you're avoiding the next day by trying to hold on to today longer because you got nothing to look forward to. So if you put something in your calendar, your schedule, or something, or a project you're working on that you're looking forward to, you're not going to want to as badly, and maybe you have to take a little practice to change the habit of firing up Netflix, video games, YouTube, whatever it may be, the night before. So because you're like, oh, I have to go to sleep on time because I have to wake up because I want to do this thing I got to do tomorrow. I can't wait for it. Yeah. Intransigence, fun word.
I mean, it's just like everything goes back to a belief, like everything. But yeah, you're right. We do stuff like that to avoid, like you got to look at, well, what am I not really wanting to do? I just don't think we follow our own intuition these days as much as like you're just being guided all the time. And some people just kind of turn that little signal off so they don't get that, but it's like you're being divinely guided.
Yeah.
Perfect.
That was a disconnect point I made earlier. It was like learning to not trust yourself. That's a big one that people, especially if you're in an environment with people that also don't trust themselves and they're externalizing their sense of what to do to it could be divine guidance, but it could also be like the wrong kind of divine guidance in a way. It's like, are you following,
is there such thing?
I'm talking like if you want to get into like Christianity or things like that, or you mentioned like what if Satan's guiding you? It's like, but it may be along the lines of, if you have a habit of drinking, like such drinking, all my friends are drinking because they're all running away from something. And now their deity, their guidance is the voice of run away from your problems. And then that becomes their new God, which is to say, like, well, my new deity, my God, my divine guidance is to not face my problems and not figure out what my beliefs are, who I really am. You might get sucked into with all that and start worshiping the wrong thing in some capacity, and then recognizing. But then you might say, look, but I like my friends, I like hanging out with them, I don't want them to disapprove of me, but it doesn't feel right, and I can't articulate why it doesn't feel right. But something doesn't feel. I don't know if I like this direction things are going. But at the same time, I also don't want to rock the boat because they're gonna get mad at me. They're gonna upset with me. They're not gonna want to talk to me anymore. That's where like that intuition is kind of like screaming at you from way in the back, like, I'm trying to tell you this is the wrong voice to be listening to. Listen to my voice. And when you have those moments, it's a tough thing, but I have to sit down and recognize, like, am I on the right path in my life? Do I have the right beliefs? Do I have the right people around me? Am I turning the speakers up on the right voice of the right divine voice? Am I turning it down intentionally through suppression, through drinking, through alcohol, through whatever kind of addiction or things you're using to numb yourself out? So crazy thoughts of the day.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say So maybe it's not that it's not divine. Maybe we can do the wordings differently. Like you think it's
Well,
divine, it's something
I
else.
mean, I would say this
What's up?
does serve you.
Depends what it's serving.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is like whatever you're
Like,
questioning, right? So hanging out with these friends, does it serve me? Well, like this is something that I would like have someone journal, right? Okay, is this one thing serving me? And then you could write out the ways that it's maybe yes, and then you could write out the ways that it's maybe no. Everything is serving you. If you're choosing to do something, it's serving you in some way. It's just about, I think this is what you're saying. What part of me is it serving? Is it serving my avoidance? Is it serving to numb out these parts of myself that I'm not willing to listen to?
yeah.
Because the numbing stuff, that's like just saying, hey, pain is coming up. What am I allowing the pain to move through me? Am I emoting my emotions? Or am I masking my emotions?
Yeah. And that's where interpretations of something like the wrong divine voice, or again, not divine, but the wrong voice of something pushing you you're listening to the wrong voice. Like you have an intuition and you can journal. Like I said, journaling is fantastic for that because you'll see who you are from day to day and you'll be able to find common threads of like, what do I actually like? What lit me up today? What didn't light me up today?
Yeah.
What made me happy? What triggered me? What didn't trigger me? What put me in a good mood? What put me in a bad mood? And then after enough days, enough weeks, enough months of that, you start to see, oh, there's a pattern here. I like this. I don't like that. And I tolerate it a little bit more often than I should, but I didn't notice that there was a pattern here. And now I had to sit down and do some work if I want to actually change these patterns and remove it. Yeah.
Yeah. Because we're in relationship to everything. We have a relationship with everything. And it's just about looking at that relationship and saying, hey, is this relationship still serving me or is it not? And then, sometimes it's not about throwing away the relationship altogether. It's just shifting it. Well, maybe, so with the drinking thing, maybe not, maybe one to two drinks, or maybe not drinking in these situations, or that, like, just look at the relationship and say, what part of it may not be serving me? I feel like whenever we're trying to judge ourselves, then we go into this shame trap. And it's like nothing is intrinsically good or bad. We get to make the meanings on everything in life. That's the beauty of this experience, is that inside of each and every person is a whole separate set of beliefs. You have yours, I have my, every single person, and no two people have the exact same beliefs. So this is what we get to do. We get to decide what things mean for us. We don't get to decide what they mean for other people. We get to decide what they mean for us. And so with every relationship, it's just about saying, how is this thing, this circumstance, this person, this job, whatever it is, how is it serving me now from this place I'm at right now? And if you can look at everything like that and just make the tweaks where you want to and saying, yeah, I think this is going to serve me better, then you don't go into the shame trap of like, oh, I drank too much, or I stayed up too late, or I didn't go to the gym, or like we just shame ourselves. And it's like one of the most negative emotions that we can get involved in. This should, would, like could, like that's just bringing in shame, where shame is one of the most toxic negative emotions you can get involved in. So leave that shit behind, please.
Well, interesting point about shame, from what I understand, is that shame essentially was an emotion that evolved to be triggered by other people. And it was designed essentially to kind
manipulate you.
It could manipulate, but also it could also be trying to be like,
manipulate.
Maybe.
Well, I mean, it's true. It's like, it's the same thing with a lot of the religions. I believe that they all started out with a very good base, a very good intention. And I think men came along and started pulling some strings, and then, used it as a very big manipulation tool. So I don't think religion in and of itself is either good or bad. You see the people that it's really working well for, and you see the other people it's not working so well for. But again, we're making our own meanings out of all of it. So when we get to guilt and shame, I believed that it started by people inflicting it on another in order to manipulate them. Hey, I need you to do this. This would make me happy for you to do this.
Yeah. I think shame may have, this is like biology and evolution. The idea being that it came along as a beneficial way to curtail bad behavior that the group didn't like. And it may have been like something extreme, like we don't punch each other in the face for no reason, we're shaming you. We don't steal stuff from each other for fun, we're shaming you. But then that evolved into, oh, you don't believe in our God, we're shaming you. Oh, you don't don't drink enough like we do, we're going to shame you. And recognizing that in that context, within the context of shame, that there's two sources where it can really come from, which is A, physical people within your life who are not approving of what you do. And you have to ask yourself, well, are they not approving because they just really, like, if you have friends that care about you and love you, want to see the best in you, and you're drinking your ass off, and they say, listen, we don't like that, we care about you, and we want to say we don't like that, this is the thing that's a good idea for you, that might be a positive way of trying to pulling the best part of you through something like shame. But then there's also the internal version of like, I feel shame because of what I think people are thinking about me. And there's like
I don't think that shame has any, I mean, of course there's a positive in everything, but I like, even if someone is struggling, like, I don't think shame is going to offer them any great, I don't think it's going to offer them anything good.
Not to use shame in that capacity. I don't know, maybe the thought is different than I'm wording it right now. I just can't word it correctly. But
I know what you mean as far as like, hey, you're kind of off your path. Are you sure you want to go that direction?
Yeah,
like,
and then
it's kind of the whole sin thing. It's like people just took that and made it into a whole thing. It's like, hey, you kind of missed the mark just a little. If you just shift it just a tiny bit, I think that's the direction you want to go in. It just means miss the mark. That's all sin means. So if we're kind of off a little bit, we just need to, hey, take a step back. Oh, yep, there's my target. Shoot again. Right.
Yeah.
Instead of making this like something to be shamed for or feeling shame about. It's like, no need to get involved in that emotion at all. I don't think it offers you anything. And the truth is, most people are constantly shaming themselves. Me being the app, that's me. And anytime I miss the mark, I just start to like bash on myself. I just go crazy in my mind, just beating the shit out of myself. And it's really something I have to be constantly aware of, because then it creates this cycle. So when I shame myself, then I start getting mean to other people. Because I feel like shit about me. So it's just being so aware of your own emotional state, to be like, oh, this all goes back to that thing I did that I'm really like beating myself up about. And now I'm beating everyone else up verbally simply because I was shaming myself. So if you could just let it go quickly, forgive very quickly. This is just a great tip to give anyone in any relationship. First of all, towards yourself, but then with other people. It's like, forgive quickly and move on and get out of that shame cycle, because it creates so much negativity in people's lives. It really does.
Yeah. And there's a whole other discussion to be had. We don't have time today about social media and shame. And then this was the idea of how you create this internal person in your head who is like, if I'm a guy who's out of shape and I see constantly 6-pack abs and giant biceps and amazing physique and Adonis and then you look in the mirror and also you feel like, oh, I feel like shit, because that version of the person I created in my head is shaming me right now for feeling like crap. And then learning to say like, well, that's not a real person. That's just a persona you've created to then start attacking yourself with, created by external things in your environment that's created in this cycle, and learning to find a healthy way to love yourself instead of shaming yourself constantly.
And a belief you accepted, because you would have had to accept a belief that this is who you need to be.
Yeah.
Who said that? Who said that's someone you need? Who said, like, you adopted that belief? And that's why I say, when you take responsibility for what the belief is like, if I see a woman, I'm like, oh, I want her body so bad. It's like, where did that come from? Oh, it came from this, that, or the other, but then I accepted it as a belief of that's what I'm supposed to look like, right? So it's about me taking and we don't all have the same ones. That's why I said we all have our own set of beliefs, but it always goes back to the belief of like, I received that as truth, instead of like that's someone's opinion or a group of people's opinion, right? Like in a church, like we receive it from churches, this set of beliefs, or from our family of origin, these certain beliefs, or on and on and on, the school. But we had to receive that as truth for us in order for it to go boop, stamped on as a belief.
Wonder where the cutoff then is. It's tough with people who, like, a good example of this might be the fat shaming movement that's still happening. That there is a nugget of truth in there of like some people don't want you to be morbidly overweight because it will kill you sooner. But then some people are attacking you because they just don't like the fact that you're overweight, because it reminds them of their sense of self-identity.
Yeah. I was telling my daughters this because I have high school daughters, and I was like, beauty it's a relative thing. I said, if you go to different countries, their idea of beauty is very, very different. You go to some third world countries and larger people are looked at as wealthy and to be desired because they're rich. If you can be fat, you're rich. And so this is just, it's all relative beliefs at the end of the day. And it's all a part of our evolvement. It's a beautiful thing. But the quicker we can release judgment about anyone else's road or path, the quicker we can release judgment, the better. And it starts by stop judging your effing self.
Love yourself. Yeah.
Let go of, you got a cat.
Yeah.
Let go of yourself. Your cat does not give an F how much you weigh or how attractive you are by this person's standards or that person. Who the F cares? We do. And then in 100 years, we're all rotting corpses and who the F cares?
Yeah. And within that, it becomes a point of, if we're talking about health and fitness, it's find exercise you like because you like it and it's good for your body. And if you happen to be hold on a few extra pounds, then that's just you. That's fine. I've known people who are heavy set, who are crazy athletic, and the ones who are that guy looks like he has 6-pack abs and he just eats Doritos and drinks all day. And it's just this knowing for yourself that you are taking care of yourself in whatever form that means for you.
Yeah. Well, a movement is definitely connected to our longevity and us taking care. I think it's our duty to take care of our vessel, our temple, because this is the temple of the divine itself. That means the divine is within you. You are holy. You are sacred. You are righteous. When you move, the better care you take of that temple, knowing that you are divine. There's no way around it. You are absolute perfection. And what you do with that is your choice. But it's you're going to get massive benefits when you take care of your temple. Absolutely. 100%. You are going to have just a better life. More active means healthier and whatnot. But yeah, I agree. That's what I tell my people. I'm whatever feels good to you, whatever way of moving your body that feels good to you, do that. But yeah, being stagnant is obviously not going to be good for your vehicle. Absolutely. And it leads to depression,
which leads to
all sorts of stuff.
All sorts of things, which leads to bad marriages, which is where you step in.
Yep.
So we'll tie this back to you and wrap this up. What is the Reclaim Your Marriage program?
It is, you could call it deep therapy, for women. I work with them on a minimum of 12 weeks. And we just work on healing those old wounds, neutralizing the trauma so that they can save their marriage. Yeah, so they can have a blissful, pleasurable, wonderful, amazing partnership.
Do you use any specific techniques unique to your program?
Lots. A lot of them have to do just with, this working with a subconscious mind. So it's modern stuff, it's scientific stuff that really just works with the subconscious mind, because I don't believe that talk therapy works. I believe that going to the root cause of the problem is the only way that you are going to actually heal, not just put band-aids on your shit, but actually heal the wounds. So, I have lots of modalities that I use.
Awesome. This has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate this.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael. Had fun.
Thank you for joining us today. If you found us informative, thought-provoking, or learned something new, please leave a review or a comment and tell a friend about the podcast. Feedback means the world to me, as I want to make this the best possible podcast that it can be, and to help others identify the causes of and solutions to problems in their own lives and villages. Until next time, let's keep working on rebuilding the village.